And we are live-ish. Welcome in, everybody. I'm one of your co-hosts, Blake Ruffino. Alongside me is my counterpart and co-host, Joe DeLeone. Good evening, good sir.
We're progressing further and further into this playoff discussion. I'm excited for today's show. Anyone who might have noticed, we are not live. We are pre-recorded.
Yes, we're live-ish.
We're live-ish, so feel free to comment. Anyone who sends super chats, we'll get to them on the next show. But as the holidays are here, there's going to be a lot of probably just a couple more instances of doing this. That Christmas is on a Wednesday. We'll figure all that out. Of course, though, we're juiced up.
I'm going live right at Christmas. I'm going live.
No, you're not. Stop it.
As soon as the kids open up the presents, I'm coming in here and I'm saying, we're going live. But for real, it is the holiday season. We greatly appreciate everybody for being here with us. Joe, we're going to do something interesting today. We're going to go through as many teams as we can today and talk about the path that each one of these playoff teams have potentially to a national title. We'll get to Georgia and Oregon today for sure, Notre Dame, more than likely Ohio State in that mix. So we're going to look at the paths of each one of these teams, and I think that gets it very interesting on how we're going to outlook and look at the outlook of this playoff situation here.
Now, the case is probably going to be harder to make for some of these teams, especially after today when we do the lower-seeded teams, the teams like Boise and SMU and Clemson. But there is a world where any of these teams can win it. The parity in this year's playoff field is very wide open. More specifically, I think that there's like 5 teams that have like a really strong case, and we're going to probably discuss all 5 of those teams on today's pod, that if everything goes as according to plan as possible, if they play their best football and they're able to catch their opponents off guard, we could see a wide range of matchups in that national championship game.
Joe, I got to push back. I think there's only 3 teams that can win it.
Really?
Yeah.
Who are the 3 teams?
Oregon, Ohio State, and Georgia.
Oregon, Ohio State, and Georgia. I would at least add in to that conversation. Well, no, I was going to say I'd add in the conversation that if Texas plays cleaner football, that they have a shot, and also Penn State with the path that they have. That's where I come with 5.
Good point about Texas. I just don't know if Joe, the toughest teams that they've played this year, they have not been able to get over the hump. And so for me, I look at this and say, could I see Texas beating Oregon ultimately down the line? Yeah, I could. But, man, they got to win one of these games against one of these bigger opponents. They've been out physical in the 2 games that they played against Georgia, and here's the truth. I trust Dylan Gabriel more than I trust Gunnar Stockton.
Right.
There just comes a part and where I don't think once Texas gets to that point, I'm not sure if they're going to be able to overcome that hump, and that's why I say I just don't see a world where they get to that yet. So we'll discuss that. But I want to start off today's show. I didn't even bring this up to you, but I got to start off today's show. Did you see this this bill that's being put in Ohio where if you plant the flag in the middle of the field in the state of Ohio that it's a felony? How soft is that?
The softness is very palpable. I kind of want to take this a little bit further than that. It's the absurdity of the rivalry that is Michigan-Ohio State. And this rivalry literally initiated, or not initiated, but is built from a civil war that was fought between Michigan and Ohio over Toledo. I can't imagine many people are really scratching and clawing to keep Toledo these days, or to get Toledo these days. This has always been a ridiculous rivalry. This is just another part of this. I wish I could sit here and say, Blake, that I don't think that this goes through, but who the hell knows? Who knows? And I would hope that
it can go through.
Right.
Here's the problem that I have. When it was announced today, in case all of you have missed it, what Joe and I are discussing about is that there was a representative in the state of Ohio that introduced a bill in reference to if you plant a flag in the middle of a football field, it's a felony charge. So let me get to 2 things. Number 1, so you can introduce a bill in reference to, or somebody can introduce a bill in reference to a flag being planted in the middle of the field. But nobody has the nuts from a federal landscape of this to plant a flag in the middle of the field and regulating some of the things that are going on in college football.
Yeah.
That is the biggest joke in all of this, right? The biggest joke in the first off, a felony.
Yeah, it should be a misdemeanor at the
it shouldn't even be against the law.
Yeah.
Come on now. Yeah. So what if a kid 20 years from now, okay, from Ohio State, they win a big game, they plant the flag in the middle of the field. You're going to have to charge your own player with a felony.
This is why this thing can't go through, but I think it's
stupid. It's so stupid.
It is stupid, but it's also so possible that this could end up becoming a law. And then I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan doesn't come back and counter with their own version of it. But you're right, it's dumb. Like, what if you're celebrating on your own home field and you're just jacked up? I can totally see this becoming a thing where, like, a Division III school does it, and it ends up becoming a whole serious issue because some kid's getting dragged off in handcuffs. It is dumb, and it stemmed from softness. It should not go through.
Well, again, here's what I hear from people. This is what I see from a holistic 25,000-foot view of college football.
Yeah.
I see a lot of you complaining. I see a lot of people complaining about where football is, college football. Mm-hmm. I agree with you on most things. However, until you get a couple of these things, a cap, a collective bargaining agreement, if that's what we want to call it, until you regulate some of these things, you won't get to what a lot of you want. But here's the problem. Every single one of you on Twitter right now is going like, this guy hit the portal, like, oh, man, we need this need. A lot of you don't want this to change. Joe, the second highest SEC championship game for viewership was this past Saturday.
Yeah.
So you're now trying to convince me and convince boosters and convince ad rev shares that it's not bigger than it's ever been. Joe, here's the truth, buddy. College football is bigger than it's ever been. And the reason we don't have legislation is because deep down when they're at the country club and they're drinking their $75 a shot scotch, okay, all of these dudes are saying, you know what, man, we're all making a shitload of money. We're not going to do anything about it. And that's just the truth. And this is just another example of complete idiocy that continues to go on in college football. All right. So let's get rolling here. So Joe and I are going to break down at least at minimum 4 teams that we see that have a path to the national title. We got to get to a quick break. We're going to talk about our good friends over at betonline.ag. When we return, we break down these games and these teams next and their path. Well, yeah, it will be games, but their paths to the national championship run. Stay with us. We'll be right back. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way for you to wager on all of your favorite sports, contests, events with the first-to-market odds and lines. Find reviews for all the news for each league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, college sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all of your sports information for live in-game betting, props, and futures. Head on over to BetOnline today and use your mobile device to join and make your first sports bet. Use our promo code BELIEVE50, that's BELIEVE50, BLEAV 50, to receive your 50% off welcome bonus on your first deposit. That's betonline.ag, betonline.ag. All right. So, Joe, today, in case you're missing it or you're watching the clip, whatever, Joe and I are going to be breaking down these teams that are in the playoff and their chances and how we see that they can go on a national title run. We're going to start off with the SEC champion, that being the Georgia Bulldogs. We'll go to Oregon next. So, Joe, the Georgia Bulldogs just won the SEC championship game. They're in the playoff. They do have a first-round bye. When you look at this Georgia team, now with Carson Beck being out, looking like a pretty bad UCL injury, hopefully that young man has a very quick recovery. Gunnar Stockton comes in. Mm-hmm. Your thoughts on how Georgia can run the table here in this playoff and potentially win 3 out of the last 4 national titles?
Without getting into the games just yet, I think that the big theme for Georgia's success to win another national title is consistency, limiting turnovers, and very specifically quality of play at the quarterback position. I'm obviously talking about Gunnar Stockton. We did a segment following the SEC championship game talking about how Gunnar Stockton boosts actually Georgia's offense. And it's not because that he is going to be a more effective passer. It's not because, he's not going to be, because Carson Beck has seen just a lot more snaps than him. He's been in a lot more circumstances. But the different layer that Gunnar Stockton brings that we talked about is that he's willing to run, and he's also a better athlete than Carson Beck. His willingness and capability to pick up some of those first downs were situations where throughout this year, where Georgia's offense has sputtered, has been because Carson Beck was taking pressures in the pocket, he was taking hits, he was taking sacks, whatever it might have been. So my biggest first thing here, Blake, for Georgia, for them getting on this path to success before we talk about like actual maybe game matchups, is what does Gunnar Stockton do? Does Gunnar Stockton step up to the table? Does he have a Stetson Bennett type run? Can he play and be an extension of this offense? And can Mike Bobo set him up to move him and make him an incorporation of the running game? All of that is going to be super important for Georgia winning this title.
Joey did it against, meaning Gunnar Stockton, he did it against one of the best defenses in college football, that being Texas. So everybody wants to talk about, and I've heard people talk about the interception. The thing that I want to look at when I look at Gunnar Stockton is pretty simple. The kid went 12 of 16 for 71 yards. Now, it's not efficient in reference to yardage on the amount of attempts and completions, but here's what I know. What I know about Gunnar Stockton, you talk about as a passer. I felt like I saw a kid that made better decisions than Carson Beck did, right? I feel like Carson Beck wants to force the ball down the field a little bit more than what Stockton did, at least in the time that we saw him. And if you're going to give Gunnar Stockton 8 yards on a hitch route, my man's going to throw the football. And that is what I think when we look at college sports or football in general. You know, I was watching Monday Night Football the other night when Joe Burrow and the gang came back and they scored the last touchdown. Joe, they scored a touchdown on a hitch route. They scored we get so enamored by doing the special things in the passing game. Truth be told, if they're going to give you 8 yards, you better go ahead and take it. I think that you're right in the sense of that Gunnar Stockton can lead them to that. And it's not like that this staff and this team and this head coach has not been in a situation before, or the head coach's mentor has been in this situation before, or that Kirby has not seen and been against in a playoff or national title when the backup quarterback comes in and wins a national title against you. He's been in this situation so many times that I think that there is nobody in college football right now that can manage this situation better than Kirby can.
Yeah.
Kid's a baller, shot caller, 20-inch blades, only Impala's getting laid tonight, and I am talking about the rap song. I saw when Gunnar Stockton took off the first time that he ran against Texas, and he ran over a defender, the entire defense came off the bench, and after that, I tweeted this during the game. Oh, they ain't losing. When they're going over, they ain't losing. And you saw the text that I sent to some personal friends. I'm like, nuh-uh. This kid's going to will them to win, and he did. Now what happens when he's got 3 weeks to prepare? Now what happens with Kirby and Bobo and this entire offense? How does their game plan change with him? It's going to be a big deal. But looking at the path for them to a national title, this is how I see it. Okay, so they have a first-round bye, and then they'll get the winner of Indiana and Notre Dame. Hypothetically, even if Indiana were to win, okay, they're just going to physically outmatch Indiana.
Right.
So I'm there. The likelihood is that they would face a Notre Dame or a Penn State in this path. And, Joe, I got to be real with you. Notre Dame and Penn State are both really good matchups for Georgia now that Gunnar Stockton's in here for me. So for them, I feel like they're in the best side of the bracket here in the sense of, hey, man, they really don't want to throw the football. Georgia's really good against the run. Penn State has had issues throwing the football at times. Allar's thrown 4 interceptions against ranked opponents, or 5 interceptions against ranked opponents this year. That's the part where I'm just like, yeah, Georgia's going to get after you too. So when I even look at the path for them, Joe, I think it's favorable based off the style of play that they have.
So 2 things you just brought up there. One with Stockton, I just want to add this in. What helped them in the second half is that they couldn't run the ball in the first half against Texas. And then suddenly they started to break away, and we had the big run from ETN, and we started to see some more chunk plays in the run game and not getting stopped completely at the line of scrimmage. I also think that they need to play their best game and just run blocking. They need to create space for those running backs, and I'm hoping that ETN is like fully healthy because we know he's been banged up. The 3 weeks coming up are going to be huge for them. to get back to full strength or as close to it as possible, because having running back impact is huge for Gunnar Stockton if he does happen to struggle. Go ahead.
Can I pause you? Add into this. They have been beat up, and Kirby went to the podium again on Monday and talked about, we got to get healthy. So to your point, not even you saying that, Kirby making it a massive deal about getting healthy.
So that's a great point. And you mentioned the matchups, the two specific matchups that they could see. It's likely that they play Notre Dame, and it's likely that they play Penn State before they square off with Oregon. For them to win those matchups, they are in a position to succeed. I look at the way that they played against Texas, the way that they completely removed Texas's run game and forced Quinn Ewers to beat him. And that led to Quinn Ewers throwing for a bunch of yards, but also throwing 2 interceptions, one of them being a tip play, yada, yada, yada. It created turnover opportunities because he threw so many passing attempts. All of that was what led to success. A similar game plan can be implemented, but needs to be effectively executed against Notre Dame and against Penn State. Notre Dame and Penn State are way better at running the football than Texas is. I don't want to hear anyone argue with that because the stats prove it, the film proves it.
Oh, nobody should be able to counteract that at all.
Right. Trey Weiser's had some good games, but they are not as deep at running back as Notre Dame and Penn State are. We have seen times throughout this year, the Georgia Tech game, and even as recent as UMass. I know that that's a game where you're kind of not totally locked in and you're not fully playing your starters, all that stuff. But they have had games this year outside of those two where they have given up a lot of rushing yardage, despite having an advantage at defensive tackle and at linebacker going up against most offensive lines. They have been leaky there. They've been inconsistent. They've had the great games and then the messy games. So for them to get through Notre Dame and Penn State, they have to play their best in run defense to not allow too many big splash plays. I think if Notre Dame and Penn State grind you out and it's 3-4 yards a carry, that's how you win. But when you start giving up the Nick Singleton runs for 50 yards and the Jeremiah Loves for 35, that's how you start to give up more big plays. That's how you get beat, and that's how you ended up going to overtime against a team like Georgia Tech.
So you talk about I'm with you on the ground and pound, 3 yards in a cloud of dust with Notre Dame, Penn State, etc. The thing that I'm going to counteract with you on that is very simple. You had a wide receiver in Singleton who could go off for Georgia Tech. I don't know if Notre Dame and Penn State have that out wide weapon. I don't. I look at Georgia and say Everett. I see Starks. I see these guys that can go one-on-one man-to-man coverage and you stack the box. There's also counteractions to this too, right? Like where I'm with you, I don't think that they're going to face a receiver better than what they saw in Singleton and Georgia Tech. I don't think that they're going to see a receiving corps as better as they saw at Texas. And Joe, and they let's call it what it is. They were snapping necks and cashing checks. They gave up a lot of yards, but Texas was just throwing it all over the place, and that they have a better room than you. I'm with you on the 3 yards in a cloud of dust.
Okay.
But I'm going to warn you on this for those teams, Notre Dame, and we'll talk about Notre Dame in just a moment here. So we're going to do the opposite part of this in just a moment. The counteract of that is you do not have the weapons that these other teams that Georgia has gone up against and faced and been able to contain. There comes a part here where I'm saying, Joe, look, man, I think that the matchups for Georgia are the best that they could have predicted and the best that they could have had. Because if you want to, and this is to be the biggest warning for all these teams that got to play them, if you want to get in a fist fight with Georgia, good luck. Good luck.
Right, and that's what Georgia needs to do, is to create that fist fight, to keep the game close, to create a situation where their opponent, Penn State or Notre Dame, has the ball late, and their path to success is running the football. They need to be able to create those stops late in games to win those performances. Here's one other interesting thing that's worth bringing up. You mentioned that Penn State and Notre Dame don't have the receivers on the outside to like really stress this Georgia secondary that's been great. Both of those offenses produce through the air through their tight ends. Tyler Warren for Penn State has been the most successful tight end in the country. Mitchell Evans for Notre Dame has been returning from his ACL injury. In the past couple of games have been his best, as well as they're three deep at the tight ends that they work in their passing game. They're their most reliable targets for Riley Leonard. Gunnar Helm, who is one of the better tight ends in college football, if not one of the best in college football, maybe the best in the SEC.
They locked him down.
They locked him down for 1 for 11, and he had a ton of drops. He was, in
fairness,
incapable of producing. So coverage of tight ends is another thing that helps Georgia's case here in those two matchups.
In fairness, though, remember Helm had the big reception to the 2-yard line. They got called back for a holding. He had multiple catches in that game. They got called back. I'm with you. If you listen, I'm not saying Helm is the best tight end in college football. I don't necessarily believe that yet. But he's one of the best. You can make the argument for him, and they really shut him down there. All right, let's move on here. You want to get to the Oregon Ducks?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Joe, as we continue on this path here about talking about teams that are in the playoff and their path to a national championship, if I'm the Oregon Ducks, I'm pretty pissed off, if I'm being honest. You go the entire season undefeated. You run through the Big Ten like a hot knife through butter, and then you get on the side of the bracket where you're having to face tougher opponents and teams than anybody throughout this entire stretch. They may have to play the winner, or they're going to have to play the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee, and then more than likely they're going to have to play the University of Texas. Don't know if that is fair to the number 1 overall seed, but when we talk about the Oregon Ducks and their path to a national championship, how do you see this one playing out?
Well, you mentioned how they have such a brutal path. It starts with that first matchup of who they're going to see, if it's going to be Tennessee or Ohio State. And Oregon fans, first of all, I've picked y'all to win a national title. I think that you're going to win it.
Oh,
one of the weaknesses. I said that on the Monday show. I said it's either Oregon or it's going to be Georgia, right? Maybe it was the Sunday show that I said that.
Or now you're picking them to win the whole thing.
I think that they're going to, but one of the weaknesses that we have identified for Oregon has been how they perform against teams that have really dominant run games. They already beat Ohio State, and they did a quality job of handling Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. Henderson ran for 8.7 yards per carry in that game, so not like a totally effective job of neutralizing him, but Quinshon Judkins had 11 for 23, so completely took him out. But as the season has progressed over the last couple of weeks or so, they have had some shaky performances, especially in the Big Ten championship game.
Yes.
When Kotelnicki said, screw it, we're just going to run the damn ball, and Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, and Andrew Aller all had big performances on the ground. It does not help them that their first matchup that they're going to see is against two teams that their offensive success circulates around running the football. Ohio State a little bit less than Tennessee, but Tennessee relies on Dylan Sampson, and how they're going to be prepared to handle Dylan Sampson is going to be super, super important. Now, what helps Oregon in both of these matchups and why I think that they're going to still win is that, one, for Tennessee's sake, their pass protection is mediocre. It's inconsistent. Nico also sometimes holds the ball way too long, and that has led to some pressures. It's led to dysfunction in the passing game and a lot of those problems. And I think that Oregon's defensive backs are a really brutal matchup for that Tennessee receiving core. So they're going to be able to get pressures on Nico and turn the ball over, get those sacks, get the ball back, even if they get early rushing yardage on certain drives. And then the other part of that with Ohio State's so banged up, I think that Oregon's pass rush is going to eat them alive. They had success the first time that they played. Nateu Younglele, Derek Harmon, and Jordan Birch are going to get home against a group that is still reshuffling and figuring out what the heck they're doing. So their D-line, for me, as what I'm saying here, is the key for their success. And before we get to Texas, I think it rolls into Texas as well. That D-line needs to carry them outside of the usual suspects being the driving factor on the offensive side of the ball.
Oregon fans need to be massive Ohio State fans this week.
Yeah.
Tennessee is the worst of the two teams. Tennessee is a worse matchup for them. Brother, look, this is how I want to say it. We got ridiculed by Oregon fans I'll just say it, for halfway through the year. And you were warned on this show that your D-line was leaky in the run game. Joe, Tennessee is a more physical offensive line at the line of scrimmage than Penn State is. what they do in the running game with Sampson, it's a clinic. Now, you are right. They have had moments in times with young offensive linemen that they've been lost at times in more so blitz pickups, but they have been lost in moments. If they need to line up on 3rd and 2 and run the ball on you, Oregon's in trouble. So if I'm an Oregon Duck fan and my path to the national championship, I'm putting on a big red shirt and saying, let's go Buckeyes. Let's go, baby. Let's go get the matchup. Because I promise you, as God is my witness, you face Tennessee in round 2 and you're gonna get got. I promise you. It is the worst matchup that you can face because they are more physical at the line of scrimmage than Penn State is. I promise you. And here's the thing, Joe. They'll milk that clock, and they'll milk that clock, and they'll milk that clock. And I got to be real with you. That defense for Tennessee is not a joke. I don't know if Tennessee gets out of the first round, though. So I say all that. It's going to be tongue-in-cheek. I don't even know if they get out of the first round. Here's the problem, or here's the thing that I think about Oregon. You're right. Offensively, Joe, I think that they're peaking. I think that they are there. The things that they're doing from a quarterback perspective, going along with their running game, what they have at their receiver core. It's look, man, I don't want to call them the best offense in the country. I'm having a hard time not thinking that they are. Here's why. They don't turn over the ball a lot. They can run the ball when they need to. And here's what I don't think people fully grasp yet. People look at like Miami and say, no, Miami is the best offense in the country. No, they're not, because they're hit or miss in so many key situations. When I need to play and you run an inverted veer with DeLeone Gabriel to end the game, I got full faith that he is the best. How do I want to say this? I think DeLeone Gabriel might be the best quarterback in this playoff. I really believe.
No doubt. No doubt.
Well, some people
he's not the most gifted, but he is. I'm talking about like physically gifted. Like Nico is the most physically gifted.
Right.
Okay. That's not a hot take because DeLeone Gabriel's 5'9" and his arm's not as big. But to what you're saying, DeLeone Gabriel, he's like 5'8", 5'9". He's a little.
No,
dude.
he's not. No, he's
not. He's a little dude. I'm gonna look that up in a second. But
you got the whole Big Ten getting messed up by a dude that's 5'8".
But that's what I'm saying, though. Here,
he's 5'11". He ain't no 5'8".
He's listed at 5'11" on the website, but there is no shot that he's 5. Look, hey, I was listed at to paint the picture here. I was listed at 6 foot on the Rhode Island Rams.
Good. I'm
5'10" and 3/4. So there's that inch and a half. Okay, forget talking about his height though. But you're right. DeLeone Gabriel is the most established and the most consistent and the best decision maker, and that ultimately I think is definitely their biggest edge.
Well, and here's the thing. The path, Joe, I got to be real with you. Outside of them facing Tennessee, they match up with Texas well. The only thing with Texas is if they were to face Texas, Oregon's biggest weakness is also Texas's biggest weakness too, right? Mm-hmm. Meaning like they're not able to stop the run consistently enough, and then Texas can't run the football. And if Texas does get there and they're able to run the football, that's a big deal. So when I look at Oregon, you have a massive problem, though, defensively. You do. Like, I'm done. I am done sticking up for the fact that when I come on here and I say, in the interior of your defensive line, you're getting pushed around. Let's look at these teams that can run the football effectively. Boise State and Penn State are the two best that you saw, and they pushed you around. That's not an opinion. It's a fact. Oh, well, it's Ashton Genty or it's this guy or it's that. Penn State lined up and pushed you around along the offensive line. That's a stone cold fact here. The three teams that you face, Ohio State is the best or the worst at not being able right now to establish and run the football. So I think offensively, they got to be carried by themselves offensively. They are the most dangerous team in this playoff bracket. I just think that they have a glaring weakness, and they're going to have to correct it. But, man, I'm just not going against them in this. I'm with you. I told you I think that Oregon's going to make it to the national title game. I think that they're going to find ways offensively to overcome in all this, and I think they're going to play for a title against Georgia.
Yeah. No, they have a difficult opening path, but there are ways for them to win.
I can make the argument it's the toughest opening path.
No, it absolutely is. And I look ahead to just talk about Texas and Georgia. I think that Oregon's offensive line also sets them up to succeed in slowing down a very productive pass rush for Texas. And then on the flip side of that, as I alluded to a second ago, Oregon's defensive line, and I don't know what the deal is with Kelvin Banks, but Oregon's defensive line is positioned to have a really good game against Quinn Ewers and getting after him. That is ultimately their key to success. Johnny Cornelius and Josh Connerly protecting against Colin Simmons and company is also very key in that. And I think if I were to pick between Oregon and Georgia, I have to go with Oregon winning that matchup. I think that they have that slight offensive momentum edge that if they stepped into that game, that they could open the game hot and try to win that way.
I got to be real with you. I think that Georgia's such a bad matchup with them because if Joe, they're getting healthy and they're able to run the football against a D-line that's been really good. And look, man, let's call it what it is. It's a very, very bad matchup for them. I'm picking Georgia to win the national title here. I picked them in the preseason. I'm not going away from them. I think they're going to win it. I just think, look, man, if you're going to give Georgia a running game, you're in trouble.
Right.
You're in trouble. So we'll see. All right. You want to go to Notre Dame here?
Yeah, let's do it.
So, Joe, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish are in the playoffs, and they are the 7 seed. They go up against the Indiana Hoosiers. So weird to say. The battle of the state of Indiana is on the line here. But as we continue on our path for teams that we see that can make it to a national title or win a national title, your team here, the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, how do you see them getting to and winning a national title if they so dare?
I just know as I'm saying this, you're going to push back. But Notre Dame was given the best path for them. Not saying the best path overall, but the best path for them to reach the national championship.
Yeah, if they would have got the 6th seed, it would have been the best path. If they would have been where Penn State is, it would have been the best path.
It would have.
They would have gotten the same exact place where they probably get to. But
yeah, and they wanted they obviously wanted that 6th seed. They wanted the 5 seed. But what I'm saying is that where they are on the side of the bracket, it's not like the cut and dry 100% best path. But where they are on this side of the bracket, I'm talking about the fact that theoretically they're going to have to face off with Georgia after Georgia's been off for a couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
They have the opportunity going up against a very green quarterback that we lauded and we think can have a big game. But the nightmare side of that is young quarterback, inexperienced quarterback, not necessarily young because he's been around for a while, but inexperienced quarterback who succumbs to the pressure of Notre Dame's defensive line. That is a winnable outcome. I'm not saying it's a guaranteed win that Notre Dame guarantees to win that football game, but it is a winnable outcome if Notre Dame plays and can be as effective as Georgia Tech's rushing attack was. That is their path to success because they are better at running the football than Georgia Tech is. They're more consistent. They've got more running backs that they can turn to. They've got just a little bit more juice that can help them get over the edge in a game like that against Georgia. And then being able to square off with Penn State, no matter when it would have been, is obviously far more favorable than if they had to take on Texas or Oregon at some point in this playoff field. Penn State is also beatable, depending on how Notre Dame's run defense plays, which can be very, very good. And we know that James Franklin is the king of failing to step up against top 5, top 10 teams. So Notre Dame is placed in this spot here where it all comes down to how do they play against Georgia. They obviously need to beat Indiana first, and we got to focus on Indiana before we jump ahead to anything else. But the ability to get Georgia without Carson Beck, and if Gunnar Stockton does not step up to the challenge as effectively as maybe Georgia fans are hoping, that is where they get past them, and then they should be able to beat Penn State if they play their best defense. Oh, man, what are you going to say here?
I just am going to continue week in, week out, day in, day out, game in, game out. Say the same exact thing. It's not just you in saying this. I've heard others say this too. I've heard Notre Dame people and media say, well, look at Georgia Tech versus Georgia. And I say to that, okay, that is something, and you're right. You can't ignore it. But then I also see people talking about how rivalry week needs to be curved on us or looked at on a curve because rival versus rival goofy things happen. I don't know how to maintain that. What I do maintain is there is going to be situations in these games. I think maybe not so much against Indiana. I think Notre Dame can just roll in there, out physical them, push them around, and do what they need to do. Even though Ohio State had issues with that, I think Notre Dame still can go in there and do that. Now you're getting to a place in the season, Joe, where let me ask you a God's honest question. I'm not trying to troll. Where have you been in a situation against a top premier team, a top 15 to 20 team, where you've seen Riley Leonard throw the football when he needs to?
That's obviously not happened.
Okay.
It's obviously not happened.
So why does it come off from Notre Dame fans in the comments when I say that I don't know if you're able to do that? Why do people hate me for saying that? Why?
It's a fair criticism to bring up, and it's something that could arise. Obviously, could arise in the playoff, especially against.
It's going to arise against Georgia. Let's call it
right. Okay. Georgia Tech didn't need to call on Haynes King to make those big passing plays. They didn't need to. They did convert in some areas, but they didn't need to call on him because they were having such success of generating big splash plays in the run game. So why I'm saying this and why I think a lot of Notre Dame fans push back on you when you bring that up is that it's not their bread and butter. It needs to be, it's a situation that they ultimately need to avoid, that I feel. That if you're executing and you're running the ball as effectively as you can, and you're not getting overly cute with it like they have done in some very short spurts that has led to turnovers in the passing game, when they're able to generate on the ground the way that they play at their best, they can run on a team like Georgia. But it all comes down to, Blake, the mentality that they show up with and the intensity that they show up with and how they start on the opening drive. That's why I'm not sitting here saying that Notre Dame beats Georgia, cut and dry, boom, done. They're my pick to win the national championship, blah, blah, blah. I am just saying this to say that in this matchup, if Georgia wins, we explained how they win. If Notre Dame were to win, the way that they win is that they have a really successful first drive running the football, and it starts to grind down Georgia, and then they start to accumulate just bigger and bigger plays. This is not that same. Hold on 1 second. It's not that same Georgia defense that we're used to seeing. I'm bringing up these games during their season and the Georgia Tech game as evidence that Georgia can get run on. Like, that's important context to bring up here.
Disagreeing with that. But I see y'all keep talking about the Georgia Tech game as if Haynes King not being there is not a massive situation.
Riley Leonard is the same quality of quarterback as Haynes King is.
Are you outside of your mind?
Dude, you can't. Wait, no, stop. You think that Haynes King's better than Riley Leonard? No, come on, man.
No. What I think is I've seen you guys looking at, well, we beat the dog shit out of Georgia Tech, and Haynes King wasn't there, but Georgia had to go into overtime. And then you thinking Haynes King not being in that game against Notre Dame is not a massive deal.
Wait. I didn't bring up that game. That game's not part of the discussion. That didn't. I'm talking about.
You're the one that brought up Georgia Tech.
No, I brought up Georgia Tech versus Georgia. I'm not talking about Notre Dame versus Georgia Tech.
Any Twitter response.
Okay, but I am not some Neanderthal on Twitter. You and I are talking about this matchup. Don't bring up that game. That has nothing to do with it.
Okay, fine. I won't bring up that game. Here's the truth. I have no clue if you can throw. I don't see a path for you right now to win it. I don't. Because
well, the point of this segment is to illustrate that.
Okay, well, here would be the reason that you did. That Riley Leonard proved all of us wrong, and on crucial third downs, he threw the football effectively and hit guys that were open. That's it.
All right, that's fair.
That is it. I don't know. I got to be real with you. I don't think your secondary's been tested. I really, 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 really don't.
USC is one of the best receiving cores in the country against one of the
top receiver was out, was he not? Lemon had to come in and go off. And then if
Zachariah Branch played and Deuce Robinson played in that game.
But the Hudson
and Kyron Hudson played in that game too.
Okay, all right. So how many yards did they throw in that game?
They threw for over 300, but as we talked about in that recap, The fourth quarter, there were a ton of garbage time passing yards because Notre Dame was up so big that they threw on every single down.
So the 3 quarters that he got no quarters and he got no yards in 3 quarters. He didn't throw for 3 touchdowns in the first 3 quarters.
They still
did he or did he not? Was it a 7-point game or was it not? Was it a 7-point game in the fourth quarter? Yes or no?
They still generated interceptions on some of those drives, but
yes or no? Did he throw for 3 touchdowns in the first 3 quarters?
I don't actually remember the stats off the top of my head, so I'm not going to say yes or no to that.
He had 5 total touchdowns. He ran for 2 on you too. So basically, what I'm hearing is the best offense that you saw in USC, you got thrown all over.
I wouldn't consider that thrown all over.
Joe, if every team in this playoff bracket, Arizona State, Boise State, and Notre Dame are the most untested week in and week out from their schedule. You can think of that I'm trolling. I'm not trolling you. What I'm telling you is if Riley Leonard is not able to throw the ball on third down, you're not going to get where you want to go. And here's another thing. Third down offensive efficiency has been dog water. It's been dog water.
Yeah, it's been an issue for them, and I won't disagree with that. But where I disagree is the way that you're framing it is that Riley Leonard has to be perfect. You're making it seem that Riley Leonard has to be perfect on third down in these situations. If Notre Dame plays...
Quinn Ewers had to, and when he couldn't, they got beat.
Texas can't run the ball the way that Notre Dame can. They can't. They haven't been able to do it all season long.
Who are they running the ball against?
Who is Texas running the ball against? The times that they've been challenged by opposing rush attacks.
I asked you about Notre Dame. You got a lot of confidence in a running game that has not been fully tested about a defense that's as good as Georgia. You're right. They're not as good as they used to be. You're right. They're not.
We can't say that as good as Georgia when they are a great defense, but they have given up some big plays.
Name a team better than Georgia that you faced.
Obviously, we haven't faced anyone as good as Georgia, but Georgia's not
remotely in the same stratosphere as them.
Georgia is not impenetrable. It's on film.
Dude, I'm going to tell y'all this every week. You think I'm trolling. I swear to God, I'm not. You're going to get your ass busted. You're going to get your ass busted.
See, this is my problem with this, though, is that, like, I think that Georgia probably beats Notre Dame, but to be as hyperbolic as to say that Notre Dame gets their ass kicked, I don't disagree with that. Georgia has shown...
I said you're going to get your ass busted.
That's the same thing.
No, it's not. You better learn Southern lingo. Joe, again, in all seriousness here, and I don't think that I have no faith in Riley Leonard on 3rd and 7 can complete a pass against a Georgia secondary.
That's why that their path to success is them winning on the ground.
Do you think Georgia's not going to do things to take that away?
Do you think that they knew that coming into the Georgia Tech game? They couldn't stop it.
Okay. Oh, okay. I'll tell you the truth. I think Haynes King is more physical than Riley Leonard.
I don't agree with that at all. Okay. Riley Leonard throws his whole body
and Haynes King doesn't.
Riley Leonard does it more than Haynes King does. There's a concern that Riley Leonard is going to get himself hurt. It happens every single week that people are saying that, like, damn, Riley Leonard might knock himself out of this game because he looks like a crash dummy.
I don't think you can get past Georgia. I know we're talking about paths here. I can't see it, buddy. I can't.
The one team that you share that you don't think that the whole point of the segment is how do you win a national title, and that just know if LSU gets in the situation next year and they're in the playoff, I'm doing the same thing to you.
Hold on. It's not a troll. It's not an LSU thing.
I know it's not. No. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that, like, the point of the segment was
not a Brian Kelly thing.
I'm not saying it's a Brian Kelly thing. All I'm saying here, though, is that despite us trying to illustrate a path for them to win a national title, you still found ways to say that they're not going to do it.
They're not.
All right, let's do Ohio State.
Okay. Joe, last team that we wrap up here with being the Ohio State Buckeyes. They are the number 8 seed. They take on Tennessee. We're talking about paths of direction for teams in the playoff to win a national title. How do you see yours going for Ohio State?
Yeah, I think the biggest problem for Ohio State in some of these dud performances, and the Oregon game is not a bad game. The Nebraska game and the Michigan game are the bad games that you played this year. Their inability to rely and lean on their elite receivers is what has killed them in those performances and what cost them against Michigan. They were going up against a Michigan secondary that was without Will Johnson and that was extremely, extremely flawed. It was giving up a ton of yards. So I think that Ohio State's biggest path to success here is lean on your superstars. You've got Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith at receiver. You've got two very talented running backs, but the way this team keeps trying to be run first, and I don't think that they're run first. They're pass first. Going to those guys at receiver and attacking opposing secondaries is what helps them win. It's how they beat a team like Oregon. It's how they're going to beat Tennessee, and it's how they can beat a team like Texas. And their D-line, the other part of this, my last bit, their D-line has to step up and play their best ball in the next few weeks. They have to go after these opposing offensive lines. A weak offensive line for Tennessee. An offensive line that's very stout in Oregon to get pressures and get after Dillon Gabriel, and then a weak and inconsistent offensive line for Texas as well.
Joe, I'm worried about Ohio State here, mainly due to the fact that when I look at them, they can't run the football. And they've had struggles along their offensive line, getting beaten up and having injuries with the center and McLaughlin going down, with the Achilles, and just their overall status. They can't run the ball against Michigan and things like that. And I do think that, look, man, I got to be real with you. If they are going to get into a path where they're going to get to a national title, that means that they found ways to be creative in the running game. They throw passes that's extensions of the running game, like get a running back out in the flat quickly, or doing a chip and then checking the ball down, where you're keeping the linebackers at bay. If they don't do that, they're going to lose. And I look at Tennessee, of all these matchups in the first round, of all these matchups really that I look at, the first round game with Tennessee and Ohio State, I think is a bad matchup for them. If you think Michigan's D-line is good, so is Tennessee's. I made a comparison the other night on my other show. Joe, I don't think that there's a team in the SEC based off of blue chip ratio versus evaluations and development that's been better defensively than Tennessee. No one. It's no one. Based off of where they've recruited, the guys that are there, and the development that they have there. You literally just showed me that you cannot run the football with an offense that can't move the ball down the field. That is the biggest concern that I have here. And you're sputtering because of injuries. You can't line up on 3rd and 6. You can't line up on 3rd and 3. You can't line up on 3rd and 1 and run the football. That has been the biggest issue. So to agree with you massively here, Joe, you better go full air raid. And Chip is not the guy to do that. Hot take. Ryan Day's got to get heavily involved in pass game situations. And you gotta, Joe, you gotta go air raid principles in this sense. You have freaks of nature on the outside that you got to get the ball to. You gotta force teams into light boxes. And when you force teams into light boxes, I think that you can get over on Tennessee secondary, even with Will Howard. I think you can do the same thing with Oregon. We saw that you did it to Oregon. But, Joe, until they prove that they get away from running the football and running and ramming their heads up against the wall, there's not a path. But here's the thing. Defensively, they're really good, man.
Yeah.
They're really good. How does this team here's the biggest thing for me. How does this team respond in a situation where they have been the butt of so many jokes the last couple of weeks since the Michigan loss? How do they find a way to be able to overcome all this? And motivation is going to be a big thing for me.
Yeah, motivation more than any team, I think this factors in, is a lot of people also, by the way, were talking about how like this could be a hostile environment for Ohio State in their own home stadium because of how pissed off fans are at Ryan Day. How do they bounce back? Is this a distraction or is this a rallying point? Is this a point that you're going to lock in and say, you know what, we really badly failed to meet our expectations. We really badly failed to beat our rival. We were supposed to be on this trajectory to go undefeated and to win a national title. What is that communication like? if they play their best ball and they play to their potential, they win a national title. That is the simplest way to put it, and it's the only team that I think, it obviously applies to every team, but it is the one team that applies to it the most because they have not played within 60% of their potential in some of these games.
Right.
Oregon game was 70% because the secondary didn't show up. The Michigan game was like 30% of your true potential because you couldn't throw the freaking ball and you couldn't move the ball down the field at all on offense. There are a lot of games where you just look and think, this team's supposed to be better. They on paper are so freaking talented. Offensive line injuries or not, you have the athletes. That is the biggest difference between them and every other team in this field. They have the best receiving core. They have the best passing offense. That gives them an edge. And they have two really good running backs that they need to get the ball in their hands and help them produce. So I'm 100% with you at that last part. If they come out slow in any of these games, they're done. They need to play like there is no tomorrow because the truth is for Ryan Day, and I know he knows this, that there is no tomorrow.
There is tomorrow. They're not going to fire him.
Well, I don't know that for certain, but I don't think that they will.
They're not going to pay that buyout. They're not firing him.
Yeah.
And to be real with you, I mean, look, man, he can't control these injuries along his offensive line either. Joe, I think that if we see a good performance out of Tennessee, I'm going to be real with you. I think they can beat anybody in the country because that would mean to me that they defensively can stop the run. We've seen them do it all year. That would also mean that offensively against a really solid defense, that they were able to find ways to win and game plan. Question now becomes is how good coaching wise can they get themselves into a situation where, Joe, they got to lean on schematics offensively. Mm-hmm. They got to get the ball out quick for Will Howard. That's just the truth. Now, if I'm Tennessee, I got to be real with you. I am playing press man coverage, going man to man, and I'm sending the house at Will Howard in this offensive line, and I'm saying you're going to have to show me that you can fix it. And if you can fix it, that's fine. If you can show me that you can do it, that's fine. But, man, I think there's a clear path for me that I think if they can contain what Tennessee will throw at them, Joe, their biggest weakness right now, running the ball, not necessarily an issue against Oregon. We saw Penn State line up and run the ball on them. They have a path there. Texas can't run the ball either. So a lot of these teams have a lot of the same issues in some aspects. I got to be real with you. It's a hard path. But they're going to have to get creative schematically, offensively, because their defense is going to carry them to a national championship. That's the only way that I see that they'll have success here.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The Ohio State, I think, is my final piece on this. So Ohio State is the biggest wild card in the whole playoff field because they could play a really disappointing opening game and get knocked out, and then we're just moving on and we're done talking about them. Or they could play at a prolific level, an inspired level, and spark a national championship run. They're the only team that I think I can say that for, that the outcomes are so volatile. There's no in between for me. There's none.
I agree. They can flip a switch and go win an Natty. You're right. They can. But, man,
we just don't know if they can do it.
Well, let me ask you this question. Have you seen the team inspired to play offensively in big moments?
From Ohio State?
Yeah, from Ohio State.
No. I know it's in there. Actually, the end of the Oregon game, except for that final drive and the way that it ended, I thought they were inspired.
Here's the truth, though, too. If you score 31 points, your defense should slow that team down for you to win. I'm never going to get on a team when you score 31 points and you say, oh, the offense lost us a game. That is a complete load of dog shit.
Right.
You know, like a big Billy Madison, light a paper bag on fire, stomp it out, dog shit. Too graphic?
True. No.
I mean, it is.
I know the reference you're talking about.
Well, there you go. Finally, you got a movie one.
I told you I've seen Billy Madison. I don't remember any of that quotes.
I mean, it was the open scene. I don't, All right. We're going to punt on the rest of these teams here, Joe, and then pick them up later on here. Until then, we'll see you guys soon. Y'all have a good night.